So good evening, respected seniors, executive members, and teachers, my dear colleagues. So today we are very happy to have the Professor Amit Thapa, who will be talking on peer reviews, what, why, and how. He is editor-in-chief of Nepal Journal of Neurosciences and head of department of the Department of Neurosurgery in KMC Sinamangal, and also chairman of the Department of Neuroscience in Grande International Hospital. He is a very prominent figure and very active member of this nation. So we welcome him for this speech. Dr. Amit, please.
Thank you, Dr. Risha, for a very kind words. Well, this topic I have chosen because this is something which we were not taught during our undergraduate, even during our postgraduate days. We were only exposed to journal clubs, but then when we talk of peer review, it is something of a different ball game, and that's what I'm going to discuss in the next 30 minutes of presentation. And this picture slides will also help the authors, the budding researchers, to look at the other side of the coin. How does a peer review takes their article and what all can be done to improve on their submission? So to begin with, peer review, as the word defines, is actually the evaluation of your work by the people of your equal standing. So the most scientific definition which I found was in the Journal of Allied Health in 2011 by Morey. So it says that the evaluation of scientific research findings or proposal for competence, significance, and originality by qualified experts who research and submit work for publication in the same field. Henceforth, you cannot be a peer reviewer unless you are not researching and publicizing in that particular topic. So the peer review actually helps to maintain the quality of the standards, improves the performance, and provides credibility. The process of the peer review starts with the submission of the article to the editor of a journal, who actually does the first peer review by himself, and then he sends it to the other peers, the people who are expert in that subject, and taking their comments into consideration. If the article is found suitable, it goes for publication, or it is returned back to the author or the researcher for more modification. Well, this is what is the science. The peer review forms the pillar of the science, because what all evidence we put forward, we have to have an element of doubt in that evidence. And unless all the evidences are proven, the science cannot be forward. Unless in religion, where we actually believe rather than the pieces of evidences we need to put forward. So peer review has a role on academia because it improves the quality of the article, the research. Particularly when we are writing, we have writer's blindness, and that's what the peer review helps us to remove those blindness things. It ensures the quality of publications and provides credibility. In words of Chris Mooney, a 2020 Pulitzer Prize author, even if individual researchers are prone to falling in love with their own theories, the broader process of peer review and institutionalization and skepticism are designed to ensure that eventually the best ideas prevail. Henceforth, the peer review actually helps us to measure the balance, the pros and cons of the ideas which one forwards, and then according to evidences, this is being accepted in wider practice. According to a research done with the collaboration of University of Tennessee and Cyber Research in 2013, 84% of the researchers believe that without peer review, there would be no control in scientific communication. And 9 out of 10 researchers feel that the peer review improves the quality of their published authors. Even as an author, you actually have to select a journal for the publication. The most preferred journals are those ones where the review quality and the speed is the paramount. And so we have seen that these refereed or the peer-reviewed journals are actually in the higher echelon of the journal publications as compared to the other non-reviewed or non-refereed articles. So this integrity of the science with the excellence of the research actually helps us to build the public trust around our work. Say, for example, this recent retraction by NEJM and Lancet, which have been a talk of the town recently regarding the use of hydroxychloroquine or chloroquine in the treatment of COVID-19. So Mandeep R. Mehta, a famous cardiologist, he is basically William Harvey Distinguished Chair of Advanced Cardiovascular Medicine in Harvard Medical University, Harvard Medical College. And he actually took the data from an unknown source, even though that source was a Surgery Fair dominated company. But then they actually found that the data could not be verified by the peer reviewers, and that's why they have to retract these articles. So a huge shame can be actually put on to a researcher if in case the data as well as the research is not qualified for publication and not validated by different authorities. From an individual perspective, well, most of the people feel that it's an academic duty to do a peer review. As a peer review, you got to see the most novel, the trend of the submission in the field. It's a good way to keep up to date with the literature. And by looking at the others' work, it also a learning experience as to what are the scientific research protocols they use, how they write their article. So it actually helps you to self-enrich yourself. And also through the process of peer review, one can become a good editors of a journal. In some of the universities, it's a requisite criteria for promotion because it adds to your CV. And in Nepal scenario, the Nepal Medical Council have actually provided CPD points for each of these peer reviewer job, if in case it is being recognized by the journal. And then subsequently, you're being recognized in the scientific committee and then community. And as per your association with the reputed journals and editors, you can actually go on with academic matchmaking or scientific collaborations in longer run. So it all started with Henry Oldenburg almost 4 centuries back. He was a journal-born British philosopher, and he's also considered to be father of modern scientific peer review. So when he started his Philosophical Transactions of Royal Society, that was in 1665, which to date is the longest running and the first peer-reviewed scientific journal, he used to write by his own handwriting accounts to different peer reviewers all over the Europe to get this the articles being submitted from all over the world peer reviewed. But then it took almost 3.5 centuries to conduct the first International Congress on Peer Review in Biomedical Publication, which nowadays has standardized different protocols of peer review and what we are following these days. So peer review has various variables. It can be, depending on transparency, a closed peer review or an open peer review. So by closed peer review, we mean that the authors or the reviewers may not be able to see each other. So in a single blind peer review, the authors are blinded to the peer reviewer, but the reviewer can see who is the author or what is his affiliation from. The benefit is that maybe that the reviewer, because of his known collaboration with the authors in the beforehand, can actually know better about the work. But the problem is that sometimes because of the professional professional rivalry or because of some personal vendetta, that particular peer review may not be beneficial to the primary author. Then comes the double blind, where both the authors and the peer reviewers are blinded to each other. Benefit is that there is no chances of involved biasness in such dealings. But then the problem is that sometimes you do not know what work the other person is being doing and what is the authenticity of the work, because you have not seen that author's place or you have not known that author beforehand. Similarly, triple blind review, closed peer review is basically where even the editors are blinded to both the peer reviewer and the authors. But in this, it is a very time-taking process. And so the open peer reviewers are the newer trend where all of the people know each other, who is reviewing, who is the author, and who is the editing person of this particular article in the journal. The best part is that it actually increases the genuineness as well as the authenticity of each of this work. And then the lot of collaboration can be achieved. But the only problem is that sometimes the negative connotation can go a very long ahead. Then depending on timing and location, it can be a pre-publication peer review, that is before the article is published, or it can be a post-publication review where most of these reviews are published along with these articles. The benefit of post-publication peer review is that it is not limited by the time. You can actually write any peer reviewer for a published article, maybe 10 years or 20 years down the line. One of the form of publication in a journal called as letters to the editor is an example of a post-publication peer review where anybody can write. Usually in the reviewer selection criteria, the authors are sometimes asked to suggest their own reviewers, or they can even ask for a non-preferred reviewers whom they do not want them to review their submission. Usually the editors invite the reviewers depending upon the various criteria which I will be discussing upon. The review process can also be a variable where it can be an independent review, which is usually used in most of the journals, including Nepal Journal of Neurosciences, where the individual peer reviewers are not supposed to talk about that article with anybody else. Interactive reviews are basically where the reviewers talk with the authors, and then they can actually improve the article on a lot good manner. But then again, it no longer remains a blinded review in that sense. And then the collaborative review is when the reviewers talk to each other for the betterment of the article. So these are the different variables which goes along with the peer reviewer. Now, how to become a reviewer? Usually editors selects the reviewer based on their qualification, whether they have published any work in that particular field, and sometimes based on the recommendation from other researchers or other reviewers whom they have worked with. So if you want to become a reviewer, first of all, you have to have some published work in that particular field. So the best part in this particular direction is that whenever you're submitting an article for a publication in a journal, there's always a slot for you to accept the invitation as a reviewer. So if you can enroll as a reviewer in that same enrollment as a author, then it goes a long way of cementing a bond between the journal and you as a reviewer. And similarly, if in case while going on a meeting, on a conferences, if you meet editors of different journals, so that's how you can actually go on with creating a sort of acquaintances with the editors to be involved as a reviewer, as well as your supervisors or the head of department, as well as the society, that the surgical society can also help you to become a reviewer of the enlisted journals. Now, peer review actually is a process which the editors look with a very positive attitude. So when talking as an editor, the editor usually wants peer reviewer to evaluate the validity of the science, the quality of the experimental design, and the appropriateness of the methods. That's the most important task. Then the second task which they actually see the peer reviewer do is to evaluate the significance of the research, the importance of the finding, and whether it will advance the field and the originality. And then the third layer of thing which they want the peer reviewers to do is to identify any scientific errors or references that are missing or incorrect. The least which they actually want is to the reviewer to identify any typographical or grammatical errors, because these are something which are usually done at the layout setting or the typesetting period. So that's why this is of least importance to us. So before we start the peer review, whenever you have an invitation by an editor to peer review, first of all, you have to check whether this article matches your area of expertise. And do you have any potential conflict of interest? Now, conflict of interest can be financial, as well as with the acquaintance of that particular author with you. Or sometimes you may be believing in some other philosophy or ideology of that particular thing, and you may try to impose that particular research with your ideology. So that may create a potential conflict of interest. So you have to disclose it. And if in case the potential conflict of interest is far more, then you can actually decline an invitation. And most important is, do you have time for doing a review? A study which has been done over 4,000 reviewers by British Science during this British Science Festival by Sense About Science Society, they have shown that usual average time for a good review is around 6 hours. So if you have time to do this particular review because it's time consuming, then only go ahead with the invitation. And if you are not supposed to do it, if you're finding it difficult to do that invitation, then you're always free to decline, but please decline it as soon as possible. And at the same time, recommend any other reviewer whom you are aware of as an expert in that particular field. So this saves the time for the peer review. And as you all know, that the peer review process is the most time consuming thing, and that's why it delays the paper from publication. So this is a snapshot of our format of reviewer comments sheet, which the Nepal Journal of Neurosciences gives to every reviewer. So you may see that the first page is basically a declaration of any conflict of interest. So after you have accepted the invitation, you have to consider it as confidential. You have to access and download the paper and see for the journal specific instructions. So basically we are looking to evaluate the quality, the impact, and the novelty. So we have to identify whether this paper is correct, and the impact, it is important. So we begin with the title and the abstract first. The first thing we look at any paper is the title, whether the title is informative and is relevant. And then the abstract. In the abstract, it should give the true picture of the study. The aim should be clear. It should also say what the study is about and how they found it. And then we don't go to the references. To see the references, we have to check its relevance and how recent it is. So according to dictum, almost 85% of the references which anybody quotes should be within 5 years of the publication. You're not supposed to quote almost 100% of a publication which is more than 10 years. So that's something where the references are all old and may not hold true for your research. And then the references has been actually placed correctly or not. So in that sense, most of the journal, including Nepal Journal of Neurosciences, has made it mandatory for the DOI number to be written in all the references, because it helps you to identify the source of the article, and then those references can be checked immediately for its correctness. Then coming to the introduction of the background, so that is the manuscript. So once you have done the first evaluation, the broad read, then you go for the first detailed read, and the first detailed read you actually read from the introduction part. So the introduction should always begin with what is already known about the topic. So if in case the author is not producing something which is already known about the topic and talking much more of irrelevant things, so that can be put a note on. Is the research question clearly outlined but in the introduction, and is the research question justified given what is already known about the topic? So that's something which has to be seen in the introduction part. Then in the methods come these 5 W's and 1 H of Aristotle. So in this, you have to actually see the process of the subject selection. That is the most important thing. So you have to check whether the author have given the inclusion and the exclusion criteria very, very clearly. Then the variables which they have defined, the type of the study they have, they are planning, and then what is the measurement variables they are actually including. So are they valid or reliable or not? So that has to be checked. And is there enough detail in order to replicate the study? So say, for example, the author is talking of some machine or some gadgets, or for that matter, even a CT scan protocol or MRI protocol, so that those protocols should be described as much in detail as possible. So if in case somebody wants to replicate the study somewhere else, then this particular data may be used to replicate the studies further. Then after going to the methodology, one should check the figures, tables, and images, whether all the critical issues in the research data have been provided or not. There are some red flag signs in these particular tables. Look for insufficient data points, statistically non-significant variation, and unclear data variables, because these are red flag signs. And if in case, say for example, an author is saying that this particular finding is statistically significant, is not giving any p-values, or for that measure is not mentioning about the odds ratio and all those things, then something is fishy, and in that cases you should always put a point. The most important thing is the ethical consideration. As a peer reviewer, the editor will always want that the peer reviewer should go through the ethical consideration of the study. So if any patient or animal data is used, it should be properly documented. Institutional review board or animal animal data should be handled with care. Ethical approval should be got, and then any element of plagiarism or fraud should be evaluated. So coming to the results, so whenever the results are presented, a peer reviewer should see whether all their data and figures which are presented are relevant to the study. In most of the papers, what we are finding is that authors are actually giving much more stress on the epidemiological data. Say, for example, age and sex, the patient's geographical distribution, which is not relevant to the study. So those tables and figures should be chopped off. They should not be kept just for the sake of putting it there. Then appropriate units, rounding, and number of the decimal should be kept. And then these data, if in case they are already put on a table, they should not be written in text again, because that is basically duplication of the data. So that has to be considered. And then one has to check about the statistically significant results and what is practically meaningful results what these authors are talking about. Then the discussion part. So in the discussion, one has to see whether the author has discussed those results from multiple angles and placed into context without being overinterpreted. And then coming to the conclusion should always answer the aims of the study. And it has to be supported by the studies. If in case somebody is putting a conclusion based on some references, then it has to be mentioned, because one has to only present what is documented in that study. And then we have to actually see for the limitation of the study whether they are fatal, and then that requires major revision or not. So once you have done that first detailed analysis, then you come for your structuring of your comments. So the comment should always start with the overall statement or summary of an article, just a line of what all the authors is actually study. And then you should talk about the strength and the impact this particular study would create. And then you should make specific comments on the weaknesses and what to do to improve, including the major points and minor points. So the major points are basically those one which needs clarification, refinement, reanalysis, rewriting, additional information. And the minor points are those which are basically involving about figures or tables, missing references, typos, or any other inconsistency. So one has to remember that this particular peer review is to encourage the scientific process of discovery and not as a derogatory mark for somebody's work. So this is a snapshot again of our NJNS review sheet, which has been provided to every reviewer. So you can see we are actually asking the reviewer to put a comment upon whether this is a significant study or not, what is the originality of the work and quality of this work. So, and then comes your final recommendation. So before you submit your peer review, one should always have a checklist. The checklist, well, this checklist is basically all the summary of what I've talked earlier. But if you have any difficulty in finding about the plagiarism, fraud, ethical concern, one can go for a COPE guidelines, that is Committee of Publication Ethics. So the COPE has its guidelines for the reviewers also, and that's why it helps a lot whenever you have certain issues with plagiarism or fraud, ethical concerns. And then you should always remove the possibility of bias in your reviews. There are certain do nots also for the peer reviews. Certainly, one should not be stressing so much on the spelling and grammar or the layout. So that's, I've already shown in the previous slide, that's a least concern for the editors. The most important concern is the validity of the study and the impact as well as the originality of the study. Do not make any ad hominem comments like this one, which is basically a synopsis of different ad hominem comments a reviewer has, editor has got. It is so much derogatory, and henceforth these ad hominem comments should not be put forward. And alternative viewpoints and theories which may conflict with your own should not be actually put forward. And always use citations whenever you have certain very genuine to tell. You can actually give some citations also to suggest that these are something which needs to be included. And then comes your recommendations. And basically recommendations are of 4 types. Either you reject the paper with proper explanation of rejection, or you can accept the paper without revision. The paper is too good that it does not require any revision as such. Or you can ask for a revision. Either it can be a major or minor. And whenever you do that, please always annotate the article, where at least at what places do you want this particular revision to be done. So I've put forward an example of a very properly done peer review. As you can see in this, the peer reviewer has put forward, first of all, in his own words, a synopsis of the study. Then he makes the comment on what are the strengths of the study, and then the revision required. So major comments and then the minor comments. And then you can see in the minor comments, he has actually put forward the page number, the lines, and what he wanted the author to revise. So in that way, it actually helps a lot. So once you do a review and submit it, you get recognized for it. Say, for example, Nepal Journal of Neurosciences provides a certificate for every reviewer, which you can submit to Nepal Medical Council for CPT points, as well as at the year end of each year-end issue, actually publishes the reviewers list of that year. There are certain journals like F1000, which actually publish the reviews with the DOI number. So you can even quote your review in a publication. As well as there are post-publication reviews, which you can do. There is an organization called Publons, which actually recognizes every review which you submit. So whenever the editor sends you back a thank you note, you can put forward this particular thank you note to Publons, and they will link it to your profile. Similarly, like a Medley profile, like in this sense. So they will keep on a link as to how many reviews you have done and to what all journals you have reported, and they can give you a star for each of the best reviews which you have performed on that particular sheet. So this actually helps to build up a profile for you as a reviewer with the standard journals all over the world. So for further learning, you can go to COPE Ethical Guidelines for Peer Review. Publons Academy actually gives a course for a peer reviewer. One can take that. It's a very good one. And it also provides a certificate at the end of the course. Plus, each of the journals to which you publish also has an a certain note for how to improve on your peer review. So this is a certificate which is provided by Publons Academy for peer reviewer after you take that course, which includes multiple choice questions at the end of the course, as well as you have to submit 2 publication reviews, post-publication reviews done by your mentor. Well, what all you review is also being analyzed. So one has to remember that. So every journal editor actually reviews the reviewer's comments as to whether it has been useful or not. So Brian Lucy, he is basically the professor of economic finance at Trinity, and he has actually mentioned about the 10 qualities of an effective peer review. which has to be professional, pleasant. It should be, the person should have read the invitation properly. It should be helpful, and the review should be scientific. Plus, it should be timely, realistic, empathetic, open, and organized. Well, so most of the top journals, the editors also review your reviewers' comment, and they actually give numbers according to this criteria. So the four things which every editor wants to read in any reviewer's review is: how clear was this review? How helpful was this review? How thorough was this review? And how timely was this review? And depending upon the responses, the number can be given from 0 to 3, 0 being poor and 3 being exceptional. And any reviewer who is getting more than 9 is considered to be an excellent reviewer. So that helps a lot for the reviewer's credibility, and it also builds up a rapport with the editor in long run. However, peer review is something, even though we are looking forward, not all is peer review, as was being put forward by Ernest Hart, the editor of British Medical Journal. With a lot of heavy daily correspondence and constant vigilance to guard against personal eccentricity, peer review is definitely a laborious and difficult task. And even though peer review is done, discrepancy can still be present. Like in one of these study where they have compared 50 retracted trial reports as compared to 50 non-retracted trial reports, they found that the discrepancy, the errors were much more in the retracted trial reports. But even then, the unretracted trial reports also had significant errors into it. So henceforth, all the discrepancies are not removed even by a good peer review. There is always a problem of unequal distribution of reviewing workload. So a person who submits a review on time, he gets more review to be done. So that increases his workload. There's a risk of suppression of innovations. So sometimes, as in this particular comment by Zygmunt Bauman, with my tongue in one cheek only, I would suggest that were our Paleolithic ancestors to discover the peer-reviewed record, we would be still sitting in caves. So sometimes it does happen that the peer reviewer may not like your idea and may return back your work. So that is always a problem. So in these cases, the editors always have the major role to play to find out whether the peer review has been genuine or not. Then there's a risk of biasness and fraud. There's a thing called peer review rings, which goes around in scientific community, where you know me and I know you, and that's why they will always forward your researches. And then is the gross delays in the manuscript turnover. So because of the scarcity of qualified reviewers, as well as the review process being non-anonymous and unpaid, this particular delay is increasing. However, with a lot of problems still in the peer review, the things have been much more streamlined. So even though the authors may see reviewers as these people taking weapons, and then the reviewer and the author running on the road with a paper in their hand, the peer review is even though may take time taking, it can be very encouraging and can give you a various insight of the study. So I've already talked about this open peer review. So this actually is a process by which it can increase the transparency, speed, and reliability, as well as consistency, context, and motivate the peer reviewer, because the peer reviewer by this concept is going to be recognized much more. But then in our society, the open peer review will still take some more time to establish, and we're looking forward to the day when this particular thing can be established in our society too. Well, I will end up with a final thought in Joseph Alpert, the editor-in-chief of the American Journal of the Medicine. So it's a professional honor to be invited to review a scientific manuscript as part of the peer review process. And it's what we should take this job very seriously. So I end up here with any queries for my presentation.
Thank you, Dr. Amit, for your very insightful presentation. So any queries from the participants? I'd like to ask past editors of the Journal of Neuroscience. So from
okay, Vanu.
sir.
Yeah, well, thank you very much, Dr. Amit. It was like a good recapitulation about editorial and review work that we have done so far. So it gave really nice recapitulation. Well, just to add one or two things, I think this paper review is just like writing a paper, writing a scientific article. So while we review the paper, we need to have a thorough knowledge on that particular topic, and also we need to have thorough knowledge about that journal. Paper is supposed to be published if accepted. So in addition, we also need to have knowledge about particular format of that journal, so that we can also suggest the same thing to the author if there is some errors or mistakes. So reviewing in an article is just like writing a paper, and writing and reviewing, I think, goes hand in hand. They complement and they supplement each other. So to be a good reviewer, you have to be a good writer, and if you are a good writer, then you become a good reviewer. So writing and reviewing goes hand in hand. So I think Dr. Amit has covered almost all topics of relevant topic of this paper reviewing, and I would like to encourage all our colleagues, juniors, especially juniors, to write, because this is the stage for them to write many papers, so that in future you will become a good reviewer. So please write to become a good reviewer. Thank you.
Very well said, Dr. Praveen. I just like to add one thing. As I've already told in the presentation, whenever you're submitting a paper, there's always an option to also apply as a reviewer. So I would recommend everybody on this particular platform to also apply for reviewership at the same time you're submitting an author, because that's the best time you can become a reviewer. So NAPJOL, since it uses OJS 3 platform, so it is open to all our members to become a member, to become a reviewer of NGNS. So if all this review process can be done through the OJS platform itself, rather than sending individual emails from the NGNS, that becomes documented in the system, and then you will be recognized by the other editors also. So since you all know OJS is hosting many other journals in its platform, so if you get enrolled as a reviewer on the OJS 3 platform itself, your work can be seen by the other editors too, and you can also be called by other journals. So I will encourage all the participants here to involve themselves as a reviewer on OJS 3 platform. That's NAPJOL.
Dr. Narendra has one comment, like where he says that all the papers that they are sent, you can sense where this is from. I think this is very right. So most of the time we can more or less guess where the work has come from, but that should not discourage us to send our peers the articles for review. So I'd like to ask one question to Dr. Amit and also senior members. Like one of the most important criticisms of this peer review system is like no due process has been followed, especially in publications where it is fee paying. So everything is fast track. But in our setting, I think whatever journals we have, all of those are free to publish. So in our setting, I think the criticism can be because of lack of manpower and everything. So we have editors, they everything from copy editing to correspondence to sending the papers to peer review. And in our setting, I think some of the most workloads about peer review is done by the journal editors themselves, like editorial review. So can you see any bias in there? So what's your view on that?
Well, Rupender, this is basically the problem of every journal editor in Nepal. The reviewers do not return their work very early, and that's why for the press of the time, the editors have to review the paper by themselves. Well, if you see the international standard, this is not permissible. As an editor, you will have to ask for the peer review. That's why we encourage that the peer review should be done on the OJS 3 platform itself, so that that particular process is documented there. See, the problem is that I'm going to give example of NGNS. In NGNS, we have now been doing much more work on OJS 3 platform. The benefit is that if I'm applying for a PubMed index later on, these authorities are actually going to check my platform whether I have been doing as an editor the peer review process or not. Because there are many various regulatory journals who, for the sake of money, just cuts off this peer review process, and by a single person, maybe the editor himself, he will be doing a so to avoid this predatory journal from acting as a referee journal, it's always better to do all this preview process in a documented format. So that's why it has to be done by the OJS 3 platform and NAPJOL, as already asked. And regarding your question, which Narendra Doksap has raised, identifying the journal, it's very, very true. Even though we do have a double-blind peer review process, this neurosurgical community in Nepal being a smaller one, we know each other, we know who is doing what work. So that's why it's very very difficult to maintain a double-blind review. But having said this, double-blind review has another connotation. So if you get invitation as a reviewer, even though you may be friend to that author, you should not be disclosing this fact to the author, because it's a double-blind review process. The reviewer should not disclose his particular position of the article to anybody else, including his friends. That has to be done. So that's why the process of double-blind review has this connotation here.
Yeah, agree with Amit. Most of the, can I say something?
So please.
Yes, Amit, unfortunately, I missed your first 15 minutes of the presentation. Somehow I lost the, so you must, the later part, I heard your presentation and it was well covered. Thank you very much. We need some people who are interested in research and journal editing, so that the society thrives, on these people, and you are one of them. And initially I and Praveen, and then Yam came. Now you have come, and there are other people, Rupendra, Resa, Gopal, the interested people. About the peer review, there is some, it's a controversial topic, and it is evolving science also. How to do exact peer review is still evolving. Some people say that peer review is just a waste of time, because real peer review happens when the paper is published. Like 2 big papers were retracted from Lancet and NJM just now. Once it went to the real, audience who are the actual worker, they realize this is fake. So real peer review happens only when it is published. But having said that, it still is a regulatory process, and we have to do peer review is a standard format. About the blinding of the review, actually people have done study on whether blinding really works or not. And in that study, what they found is, even if you do real true blinding, 50% of the time, if the reviewer really reviewed, not cursory review, it is possible to identify from which institute the paper originated. So 50% of the time you can find out, but still blinding is also good. Another part, whether you covered or not, even if it comes from the 2 peer reviewer, still the editorial board has the right to reject or accept still.
Yes.
So ultimately the editorial board, I didn't know whether you cover that.
No, I did speak about it.
Yeah, you covered that.
Mm-hmm.
And about the rejection
case, please say.
About the rejection criteria, most of the time you don't your research is waste of time. You just mentioned that. There are actually 3 things they say. Number one is, if the article is, even if it's very good, but if it is outside the scope of the journal, you don't publish it. Second is, if it doesn't meet the journal's quality of standard, it doesn't, you don't publish. And third and obvious one is, if it has got very limited scientific merit, then you don't publish it. So these are the 3 reasons why people, reviewers usually recommend rejecting the paper. And basically these are the things the reviewers should do. And there are paid reviewer also. Some journal give some little bit of incentive, monetary incentive, but it is the academic recognition, which Dr. Amit Thapa mentioned, that should be above all the monetary, incentive you get. These are my comments. Well presented, Amit.
Thank you, sir. So actually, in one of my slides, I did mention it. So we have to call it the quality, impact, and novelty. So these are the 3 things which goes against.
Yes. Okay, great.
So most of the time, peer review process, the technical part is, most of the time it's not an issue, because in most well-established publishers, I think they follow each step, each process step by step. But most of the criticisms that has been laid on the peer review process is about the ethical values. So I think one conjecture that we can come up to here, it's like something like what you call a democracy. Unless there is a better system of governance, this is their debate. So what do you say about this? So unless we find a better way.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, agreed on that.
So any other comments from any of the participants, please? Dr. Reza?
Maybe we can also put a time duration for reviewing the article so that the reviewer can review it on time, maybe 2 weeks or 1 month. We can ask before whether he or she has time to review it within 1 month. If he or she says yes, then we give, otherwise it will take a lot of time. Maybe that is one issue we can take.
Yeah, 2 weeks should be reasonable actually. 2 weeks per article should be reasonable. And actually reviewers should declare the conflict of interest beforehand.
Yes.
So technically I cannot review my residence paper because I'll be positively biased or negatively biased. That's a risk also.
Yes.
So conflict of interest you have to declare beforehand is also one of the criteria, no, Risa?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
That's true.
And
Sir.
then
That's
2
true.
weeks should be reasonable.
So that's why every journal, if in case it's asking for your review, will always put a conflict of interest declaration first. So until unless you do not declare it, you do not go for the proper peer review process.
That's true.
So just for the information, even Nepal Journal of Neurosciences gives 2 weeks period for every reviewer to comment on it. And then once it's nearing the time interval they're asked for, we give another notice almost 3 days prior to their projected date of submission. And if in case it's overdue, then we have to again call for their review. But then we wait almost for a month for the reviewer to give the response finally. And if by a month we do not get a response from that reviewer, then we close down the reviewer, and that reviewer is not send another review for another year. So that's the process we are following. So if you are not getting any further review from NJNS, trust me that you have not reviewed some article in the past after accepting the invitation.
Yes. Blacklisting the reviewer is also there, right? Now I think we have in our permanent office in the NMA. So we should actually have a dedicated staff also, because it's so exhausting for the editors to review and the sub-copy editing, spelling, and then arranging the references. And then it becomes more streamlined. That's my suggestion. Now, I think the nation has a lot of money now with no conferences on.
Thank you for suggesting.
We should spend that money, Reza.
Dr. Rajiv is here, our General Secretary is here. So General Secretary, sir, please
Rajiv,
give us some more office staff.
Yeah, truly said, sir. We have a lot of money now. We can utilize it.
So our treasurer Gopal is also here.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's wonderful.
Namaste. I'm also here. A few things. I mean, we have got, I think, government official office of now. So the purpose is having more and more activities of nation in that particular place. Of course, if the editorial board wants to use it, that is, I think, the best thing we can do. And of course, I think once the lockdown is over, I think we can have all the meetings there. Probably even some CMEs also could be organized in this the hall up at the rooftop. So I think we can utilize a lot. And very well said. The journal work also can be done there. It's because it is a good room. More we utilize, I think the money we spend to buy it will be really worth it. And about the staff, see, if we have got enough work to engage a full-time worker, it's worth keeping definitely a staff. But it's also two-way. Keeping a staff, not giving him or her enough work is also not right. If we have got enough work to engage he or she, definitely we can keep a staff. But I think since they are members of different categories here, new, old, and just joined, we don't have we have money to spend for academics. We have enough money for that. But of course, has to be very judiciously used because it has to be purely justified. So please don't go away with the impression that Nathan got a lot of money for nothing. We all worked for it, and especially the previous presidents have worked very, very hard to collect that much of money. Uh, and about today's peer review, thank you, Amit. Actually, I had reviewed a few articles, but once I listened to your talk, I'm sorry I made a lot of mistakes, but I think for the reviews that will be done in future, I'll be very more careful now. And coming Saturday, Dr. Nilam and his team from Jumla would be presenting on thoracolumbar fracture and probably something on what they're doing there. I think it should be very, very interesting to listen to him, how he has sacrificed and devoted his career and his work to start a neurosurgical center in Jumla. So with all applaud and appreciation, let's please join our webinar on Saturday, and it will start at 4 o'clock. So if there's anything about the topic, please continue.
Okay, so with the thank you, Dr. Krishna, for kind words, and also the agreement to start employing some staff for the journal. Well, we definitely have more work now. With the kind permission of the moderators, I would like to put forward some questions for the audience, and let's see how much our audience had been attentive to the presentations. So I read this question, and please answer responses on the chat box in the option of A, B, C, D, E. So the first question goes like this: when should you decline a review invitation? If you do not have expertise to review most aspects of the paper, if you do not have time to meet the review deadline, if you cannot be impartial or maintain confidentiality of the paper, and D, that is all of the above. That is quite a simple question. Yeah, so everybody answered D, so that's not a major brainstormer. But then this is another one, the next question here. As a reviewer, I receive a paper which has copied the methods adopted in United Kingdom. This study has been done in India and Pakistan. Should I reject this paper outrightly? Option A, option B. Yes or no? Okay, so the most of the responses are basically no. There are a few responses which has said that it has to be rejected. Well, as an editor, as well as an informed reviewer, even if you have copied a method, but then if in case that method is genuinely adopted and then it is actually being done to a population where that study has not been done, because we all know there's a geographical ethnic variation amongst the findings. So this may actually be conducted. Only thing is that the study should be genuine and then it should be done in a proper manner. Of course, if in case it has been done in Nepal and they are doing it again in Nepal, then that has to be seen whether it actually adds to the literature or not. Then we go to the next question. I reviewed a paper in which the author has used data from his published paper and the results are similar as the previous one. Is this plagiarism? Well, most of you are right. It is definitely a sort of self-plagiarism. Also, it has been covered in the last presentation by Dr. Praveen as salami slicing. So if in case a person is actually using all the data as well as the results of the previous one, that is not allowed to be published in another article. However, there are some exceptions. If in case it's a randomized clinical trial involving multicentric and then it actually has a huge significance for the practice as well as for adoption as a guideline, then that paper may be appearing in 2 or 3 journals, but then the recommendation is that those journals should be talking to different audiences. Say, for example, a study on spine may have published in orthopedic journal, which the neurosurgeons are not reading, and that particular author group may actually publish that article in the another journal which is being read by neurosurgeons for the broader acceptance. So there are certain exceptions, but in most of the format, if in case the data and the results are similar, then you are not allowed to publish it again. That becomes a sort of a plagiarism. Then the last and the final question, what are the qualities of a good reviewer? We have already seen in the presentation. So he should be knowledgeable in the subject matter. He should be good at communicating clearly and courteously. He should be able to meet the deadlines and do all of the above. Well, this happens to be the most easiest one. So I end my questions here, and you all are right, that is the D. So he should have all the above criterias. And as what Dr. Krishna has already declared, so we have another presentation coming on 20th of June by Dr. Neelam Kumar Manav, and they will let's hear to his experiences and we can contribute. So this session will be moderated by Dr. Samir Acharya and Dr. Prakash Paudel. And just for information, our website has already been updated with all these webinars. So those webinars who could be recorded properly, the link is being provided near, just in front of those webinars. Otherwise, we are trying to include at least the PDF files of the presentations for the later preview of other participants. So thank you for your kind attention, and I'm open to any suggestions, please.
Thank you, Amit, and thank you all the friends. Thank you, Intas. Thank you, Lakshmanji.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you.
I think shall we end today's webinar, Amit?
Dr. Resha?
And the moderators?
Yes, sir. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. So we hope to meet on Saturday at 4 p.m. with Dr. Neelam and his work. Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Lakshmanji. Thank you, Intas.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you. Stay safe, sir. Take care.
You too. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.